Hello everyone, Scott Devers here, Visual Evangelist. Today I'm going to tell you about the story of one man and his journey to Christ. Now this man, we read about this in Mark chapter number 2. We don't know what this man's name was, but what we do know is that his legs were wonky. His legs didn't work. Just for the fun of it, let's call this man Fred. And this is Fred and his wonky legs. Now Fred had 4 friends. And these 4 friends had heard that Jesus was in town. I'm trying to tidy up my 4. How's that? That's better. And these 4 friends had heard that Jesus was in town. And he was known to heal people that couldn't speak, people that couldn't see, people that couldn't hear, and even he'd raise the dead. So these 4 friends took their friend Fred, the guy with the wonky legs. Now Fred, because of his legs being like this, he laid on a pallet all day out in the streets and he would beg for money. He might have wondered why that happened. And sometimes we do wonder about these things. But Fred had 4 friends, and they took him and they carried him down the road to where Jesus was. Now Jesus was in a house. And the Bible tells us that there was such a large crowd there to see Jesus that day that the house was surrounded. And even when the friends came and they got to where the door was, there was no way through that door. And then they went to the window. And they had to look through the window. And they looked this way and that way. And the place was absolutely jammed. But these 4 friends were desperate to get their friend to Jesus. They were desperate. So they were looking about at the house. Now the house didn't have a pointy roof like this. It had a flat roof like this. And somewhere around that property, they saw a set of stairs. And these stairs went from down at the bottom of the house right up to the roof. So they took their friend Fred and his bed, and somehow or another, they got him up these stairs. And they went to the top of the house, and they began doing the only thing they could do, and they began tearing a hole in the roof of that house. It's an amazing thing to do. Jesus was in that house. He must have seen the dirt begin to fall down, you see. But he knew what was going on. Jesus knows everything. And he knew about these 4 friends, and he knew about Fred. And they started off with a little tiny hole, and they made that hole bigger and bigger and bigger till they got one big enough to take their friend Fred. And they took him with his bed and all, and they lowered him down through the hole, down to where Jesus was. Now the next thing that happened is, and apparently Jesus wasn't startled, because Jesus doesn't get startled. God is never surprised by the events that go on in the world. And anyway, this bed comes down. I'm sure everybody else was startled. And then Jesus looked at that man. He looked at his friends, and Jesus said, "Because of your faith, your sins are forgiven." And that man had faith in Jesus. Now these Pharisees and critics were all around the room observing what Jesus was doing. And they said to Jesus, "Who do you think you are to forgive sins?" And Jesus said, "Well, which is harder to do, forgive sins or to heal a man?" And then Jesus, in the name of God, told this man to get up. And I can imagine there he was trying to get himself up on one elbow, perhaps. We don't know how it worked. But he got up, he stood up, and his legs weren't wonky. His legs were solid and dependable. Jesus said, "Now pick up your mat, pick up your bed, and you go home and go get a job, boy. You're okay now." And the man picked up his bed, and he walked away home properly, undoubtedly praising the Lord for all that he had done in his life. and such is the case when you come to Jesus. And this man had been brought to Jesus by his 4 friends. The 4 friends did right in bringing a man to Jesus. And Fred, with the wonky legs, he did right when he put his faith in Jesus. His sins were forgiven. Which was the most important? Getting his legs healed or his sins forgiven? Well, when Fred got old, there would come a time when his legs would not work anymore. In fact, his body wouldn't work anymore, and Fred was going to die one day. And so his legs would become useless in the future, no matter what happened. Now, he had the use of them for a little while, but eventually, old Fred would get old, his legs would stop working, he would once again find himself lying on a bed. But when Fred, with the wonky legs that had been healed, because his sins were forgiven, when Fred died, he went straight up to be with the Lord. The most important thing that could ever happen, being born again. And it's so important, too, that we bring our friends to Christ. Nothing is more important than that.